Okay, now this is National Museum of African American History and Culture. It says Freedmen's Bureau records. And it says seek your ancestors in the Civil War era. The United States Bureau of Refugees, Freedmen, and Abandoned Lands. Well, the lands was abandoned because the president at the time, Abraham Lincoln, he was going against the rebellious states. And a lot of those rebellious states that wanted to break away from the Union was in the South, where the plantations were. And the South were making a lot of money off of the labor that enslaved Indians and Africans were doing when it came to cotton. And cotton was king, and it was a cash crop, a major cash crop that the southern states was making a lot of money off of. So anyway, it says commonly known as the Freedmen's Bureau was created by Congress in 1865 to assist in the political and social reconstruction of post-war southern states and to help formerly enslaved people make their transition from slavery to freedom and citizenship. In the process, the Bureau created millions of records that contain the names of hundreds of thousands of formerly enslaved individuals and southern white refugees. Now, we're going to look into that word and see what refugee means, okay? I think it means a person that doesn't have like a nation or a land or something to that effect, or like a nationality or something, but we're going to look into that to see exactly what that means, okay? But what they're covering up is the fact that these southern white refugees, like, where did they come from? Like, did they just got imported from Europe off the boat, or, what happened? That's the thing, and I believe that those white refugees were people that was enslaved. That's what I believe. But anyway, it says the museum, in collaboration with Family Search International, has indexed the individual names found in the Bureau records. In Phase 1, we are releasing records from Delaware, Maryland, North Carolina, Virginia, Washington, D.C. Phase 2 will include the remaining states of Alabama, Arkansas, Georgia, Louisiana, Tennessee, Texas, Mississippi, Kentucky, Missouri, South Carolina, and Florida. Okay. And then they have a picture of a record right here. And it says, report of rations given to freedmen and poor whites, Raleigh, North Carolina, July 30th, 1866. And it says the Freedmen's Bureau Transcription Project. The museum has collaborated with the Smithsonian Transcription Center to transcribe more than 1.5 million image files from the Freedmen Bureau records. The Transcription Center is a platform where digital volunteers can transcribe and review transcriptions of Smithsonian collections. The Freedmen Bureau Transcription Project is the largest crowdsourcing initiative ever sponsored by the Smithsonian. Once completed, the Freedmen's Bureau Transcription Project will allow full-text searches that provide access to both images and transcriptions of the original records. Family historians, genealogists, students, and scholars around the world will have online access to these records. In addition, these transcribed records will be keyword searchable, reducing the effort required to find a person or topic. And then it says the post-Civil War era in our knowledge and post-Emancipation family life. And then you see here it says Freedmen School. It says the Bureau helps support schools like this one at James Plantation. Now we know that the freedmen were Indians, and Aboriginal Mac have basically exposed that, because all this time they were trying to say that the freedmen, that they were slaves, that they really weren't people of Indian descent, and that they tried to lie and say that they were people of African descent, but that's not true. So, Aboriginal Mac, he breaks that down very well, and he goes into detail on that. Anyways, it says, History of Freedmen's Bureau. Congress established the Bureau of Refugees, Freedmen, and Abandoned Lands in 1865 to assist in the reconstruction of the South and to aid formerly enslaved individuals transition to freedom and citizenship administered by the War Department. The Bureau followed the department's war-inspired record-keeping system. These handwritten records, including letters, labor contracts. Now that's what Dane Calloway was talking about. It was a labor dispute. Lists of food rations issued, indentures of apprenticeship, marriage and hospital registers, and census lists. They provide a unique view into the lives of the newly freed individuals and the social conditions of the South after the war. And it says the Bureau was responsible for providing assistance to 4 million formerly enslaved individuals and hundreds of thousands of impoverished Southern whites. The Bureau provided food, clothing, medical care, legal representation, promoted education, helped legalize marriages, and assisted African American soldiers and sailors in securing back pay, enlistment bounties, and pension. Now we know that when they say African American soldiers, those people were called Negroes at the time. And we know that most of those Negroes were of American Indian descent or of American Indian and African descent in some cases. Okay, so in addition, the Bureau promoted a system of labor contracts to replace the slavery system and tried to settle freedmen and women on abandoned or confiscated land. The Bureau was also responsible for protecting freedmen and women from intimidation and assaults by Southern whites. The Bureau set up offices in major cities in 15 southern and border states and the District of Columbia. Underfunded by Congress and opposed by President Andrew Johnson, the Bureau only operated between 1865 and 1872. Okay, so that's what they have to say about that. Okay, so now we're at archives.gov, and it says National Archives. And we're looking at here the Emancipation Proclamation. Okay, and it says President Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation on January 1st, 1863. As the nation approached its third year of bloody civil war, the proclamation declared that all persons held as slaves within the rebellious states are and henceforward shall be free. Despite this expansive wording, the Emancipation Proclamation was limited in many ways. It applied only to states that had seceded from the United States, leaving the slavery untouched in the loyal border states. It also expressly exempted parts of the Confederacy, the Southern secessionist states that had already come under Northern control. Most important, the freedom it promised depended upon United States military victory. Although the Emancipation Proclamation did not end slavery in the nation, it captured the hearts and imagination of millions of Americans and fundamentally transformed the character of the war. After January 1st, 1863, every advance of the federal troops expanded the domain of freedom. Moreover, the proclamation announced the acceptance of black men in the Union Army and Navy, enabling the liberated to become liberators. By the end of the war, almost 200,000 black soldiers and sailors had fought for the Union and freedom. From the first days of the Civil War, slaves had acted to secure their own liberty. The Emancipation Proclamation confirmed their insistence that the war for the Union must become a war for freedom. It added morale force to the Union cause and strengthened the Union more militarily and politically. As a milestone along the road to slavery's final destruction, the Emancipation Proclamation has assumed a place among the great documents of human freedom. The original Emancipation Proclamation of January 1st, 1863 is in the National Archives in Washington, D.C., with the text covering 5 pages. The document was originally tied with narrow red and blue ribbons, which were attached to the signature page by a wavered impression of a seal of the United States. Most of the ribbon remains, but parts of the seal are still decipherable, but other parts have worn off. The document was bound with other proclamations in large volume preserved for many years by the Department of State. When it was prepared for binding, it was reinforced with strips along the center folds and then mounted on a still larger sheet of heavy paper written in red ink. On the upper right hand corner of this large sheet is the number Proclamation 95, given to it by the Department of State long after it was signed. With other records, the volume containing the Emancipation Proclamation was transformed in 1936 from the Department of State to the National Archives of the United States. Okay. And so they're showing you like the document of what was written and everything like that. Okay. So that's what they're showing you there. Okay, guys. And now I went to Merriam-Webster's legal dictionary, and this is what it says here. The legal definition of a refugee: an individual seeking refuge or asylum, especially an individual who has left his or her native country and is unwilling or unable to return to it because of persecution or fear of persecution, because of race, religion, membership in a particular social group, or political opinion. So to me, that definitely sounds like the Europeans. Okay. They were definitely the refugees. Okay. So now we get that. That's understood. Okay, so remember what they said, the Freedmen Bureau, it said refugees and abandoned lands, right? So refugee, this is in the etymological dictionary, and it's noun, 1680s, one who flees to a refuge or shelter or place of safety, one who in times of persecution or political disorder flees to a foreign country for safety. Now that seems to me that they were speaking of or talking about probably Europeans, because allegedly they were leaving Europe because they were being persecuted by the Moors that was in England, because they were being, hung there. They were being thrown in dungeons because of debt that they owed, So cause they had debtor's prison there. Okay. So anyway, it says French refugee, use of past participle, refugier, to take shelter, protect. Okay. It says in English, the word was first applied to French Huguenots who migrated from the revocation of 1685 of the Edict of Nantes. The word meant one seeking asylum, until 1914, when it evolved to mean one fleeing home. Okay. Very interesting. All right. So I'm going to see if they also have this definition in the Black Law Dictionary. Okay, so Daniel D. McAlpin, Freedmen's Bank Records. Daniel D. McAlpin, it says Savannah, Georgia. He was 47. His complexion was black. Charleston. His occupation was a porter. His father's name was William. His mother's name was Minty Drayton. The event took place on the 1st of February, 1871. Account number 6386. Event took place in Charleston, South Carolina. But he was born in Savannah, Georgia. Okay. So, and then they have a picture of the original, right here. And this is on the website Family Search. So I'm clicking on this right now, bringing it up. so you guys can see it for yourselves. You see, this is what it says right here. And it says February 1st, 1841, Savannah, Georgia. Charleston. And then it says his age. And it says that his father, it looks like it's saying that his father was deceased. And that he didn't have any brothers or sisters. Okay? So that's how the record looks like. And then this is, somebody else, Alexander Hunt. And then these are other people, the last name of Frost. Somebody else with the last name of Gay. Okay? So this is how the record looked like for people who had an account at the Freedmen Bank and Trust.
When I read, it talks about Indians who live apart from their tribes and who have citizenship in the United States, national citizenship, right? Man, look, listen to it. Just listen to this. Listen to what this lady said, right? Indian slaves, right?
Okay, they were slaves. We don't know that they were Indians.
It says it on the thing I just sent you.
It's talking about Choctaw Freedmen.
Then how come it does not have Choctaw Freedmen?
Okay, it does at the beginning, like in the Roles of Freedmen, Volume 1.
Now look, let me stop right there. So y'all remember I was talking to this lady and she kept saying, oh, freedmen don't have Indian blood. Freedmen were slaves, this. And I showed my family records to show the proof to debunk what she said, right? So this is even more proof. Check this out. This is for all the freedmen. I don't care who you are, what nation you from. If your people was listed as freedmen, they were listed as Indians. But look, let me read this. Let me zoom in so y'all can see. We're going to read this shit together. Congress in 1924 conferred national citizenship on all Indians born in the United States. That just happened in 1924. Title 8 USCA 1401 A and 2. Before that time, individual Indians could become citizens in a number of ways. The General Allotment Act, as well as some special allotment statutes, conferred citizenship upon Indians who received allotments. It don't stop. General Allotment Act, Chapter 119, subsection 6 and 24, Stat 388 and 390 in the year 1887. That act also provided citizenship for Indians who took up residence apart from their tribes and adopted the habits of civilized life. So, once again, that act also provided citizenship for Indians who took up residence apart from their tribes and adopted the habits of civilized life. So who are these freedmen again? Fucking Indians who took up residence apart from their tribes. But that don't mean that they're not from their tribes. Let's continue to read. While the 1924 statute makes all native-born Indians United States citizens, it is the 14th Amendment that makes them citizens of the states where they reside as well. The status of Indians as citizens of the United States and of the individual states does not interfere with Indian relationship to their tribes or with the trust relationship between the tribes and the federal government. Motherfucker. So there ain't no more. Look, write this shit down, y'all, because ain't no more of them saying freedmen are not Indians. Freedmen don't possess the blood. Freedmen are fucking Indians who got land allotments, who wanted to live away from the tribe, but that does not mean that they're not a part of the tribe anymore. Let's read this again. The status of Indians as citizens of the United States and of the individual states does not interfere with the Indians' relationship to their tribes or with the trust relationship between the tribes and the federal government. Now let's go to the treaty. Let's go to the fucking treaty. This is the Treaty of 1866. So if any one of y'all people are freemen, y'all fucking Indians. And they trying to discriminate against us. The said nations further agree that all Negroes not otherwise disqualified or disabled shall be competent witnesses in all civil and criminal suits and proceedings in the Choctaw and Chickasaw courts. Now, at this time, they was applying Negro to Indians. So a Negro wasn't somebody from Africa. They changed that definition recently. Let's continue to read. Any law to the contrary notwithstanding. So to make a law that goes against, or to make a code, or to make a law that goes against this is notwithstanding. And they fully recognize the right of the freedmen to a fair remuneration. So Indian workers, I told y'all, this shit about freedmen being slaves and shit like that, freedmen were Indian workers. So if you want to say they were slaves about their money. Slaves who had contracts. On reasonable and equitable contracts, like I just said, for their labor, which the law should aid them to enforce. And they agree on the part of their respective nations that all laws shall be equal in their operation upon Choctaws, Chickasaws, and Negroes, and that no distinction affecting the latter shall at any time be made. Once again, Choctaws, Chickasaws, and Negroes, and that no distinction affecting the latter shall at any time be made, and that they shall be treated with kindness and be protected against injury. And they further agree that while the said freedmen now in the Choctaw and Chickasaw nations, although the freedmen were already Indians. There was already Indians. Because the General Allotment Act gave Indians land. They were already part of the tribes. And like I said, freedmen were workers. They had I don't know what type of contracts they had, but it's something about an Indian freedman or a freedman, just a freedman period. They don't want us knowing what's really going on.
Okay, this is what the university has on this, and it says Freedmen in Southern Society Project. It says